You feel it before you name it, a tightening in the chest, the urge to explain, defend, strike back, or withdraw. Not weakness, information. Emotion surfaces when control is threatened, when identity feels exposed. Most men react and call it honesty. Time has proven otherwise. Reaction is leakage. Discipline begins where expression ends. These moments arrive quietly, disguised as daily friction. If you misread them, you pay in reputation, leverage, and self-respect. If you read them correctly, you gain something rarer: authority without noise. The first truth is this: the moment you are publicly challenged is not about the challenge, it is about exposure. When someone questions you in front of others, the pressure you feel is not coming from them. It comes from the sudden awareness that your image is no longer fully under your control. Most men confuse that pressure with injustice. They respond emotionally, not to correct the record, but to reclaim status. They speak faster, louder, sharper. They mistake volume for authority. Public challenge triggers an ancient reflex. In groups, reputation determines position. When it feels threatened, emotion rushes in to protect it. But emotion is clumsy. It overcorrects. It reveals insecurity before it restores credibility. The man who reacts publicly tells everyone something he did not intend to say, that the challenge landed. Silence, restraint, and measured response communicate the opposite. This is where discipline replaces instinct. You are not obligated to respond on the timeline imposed by others. A challenge made in public does not require a public reaction. In fact, immediate response often benefits the challenger more than you. It gives them your attention, your energy, and your frame. Control is lost the moment you accept their terms. Think of a meeting, a social gathering, a workplace exchange. Someone questions your decision with a tone that invites an audience. The emotional impulse says, "Correct them now," before others believe it. But belief is not shaped by speed. It is shaped by consistency. Those who matter are already watching patterns, not moments. Those who don't are irrelevant. A restrained response forces the situation to slow down. It creates asymmetry. While others expect reaction, you offer composure. While noise rises, you lower your voice or remain still. This is not passivity. It is selection. You choose when, where, and how to address the issue, if at all. Often, the most effective correction happens later, privately, when emotion has drained from the room and leverage has shifted back to you. There is also a quieter truth. Not every public challenge deserves acknowledgement. Some are tests, some are projections, some are bids for attention. Responding emotionally validates all of them. Not responding filters them out. Time has proven this pattern repeatedly. Those who maintain authority do not rush to defend it. They let their behavior, results, and consistency do the work. Here is the anchor you carry into that moment. Control speaks slower than emotion. When you master this, the tension does not disappear. It sharpens. You feel the urge and deny it. You notice the heat and refuse to act from it. Others sense this refusal, even if they cannot name it. The room adjusts, and you remain where you were, unmoved, watching the impulse fade before it can claim you. The second truth is this: when someone close disappoints you without explanation, emotion rushes in to fill the silence. You replay conversations. You search for signals you missed. You build narratives to replace what was never said. The discomfort is not caused by what they did. It is caused by the absence of clarity, and absence tempts reaction. Closeness creates expectation. Expectation creates entitlement. When behavior breaks that expectation without warning, the mind demands resolution. Emotion offers a shortcut. Confront them now. Withdraw immediately. Signal pain so it is recognized. But emotional response in this moment is not communication, it is leakage. It hands control to uncertainty. Disappointment from someone close feels personal because proximity lowers defenses. You allowed access. When that access results in silence, distance, or contradiction, the ego interprets it as rejection. Emotion rises to restore balance, to force meaning where none has been offered. But meaning forced under pressure is rarely accurate. It is usually self-serving. Consider the familiar situation. A friend changes behavior. A partner grows distant. A trusted colleague acts out of alignment. No explanation arrives. The emotional impulse says you deserve answers now. That urgency is the trap. People who act without explanation are already operating on their own timeline. Emotional reaction does not synchronize it with yours. It only exposes need. Restraint here is not coldness. It is clarity preservation. By not reacting emotionally, you allow reality to surface on its own terms. People eventually reveal motives through patterns, not apologies. When you respond too soon, you interrupt that process. You replace observation with interference. There is also a quieter layer. Sometimes disappointment has nothing to do with you, sometimes it does. Emotion cannot distinguish between the two. It reacts to both the same way. Discipline does not. Discipline waits. It watches behavior stabilize or deteriorate. It gathers evidence without demanding reassurance. This is where most men fail. They confuse emotional expression with honesty. They believe reacting proves authenticity. Time has proven the opposite. Emotional response in moments of disappointment often distorts truth. It pressures the other person to manage your feelings instead of revealing their own position. What follows is performance, not clarity. A restrained posture changes the dynamic. When you do not react, you create space. In that space, the other person either steps forward or steps away. Both outcomes are information. Neither requires your emotional expenditure. Authority is maintained by the man who does not beg reality to explain itself. Carry this sentence with you. Silence reveals more than reaction. This does not remove the discomfort. You still feel the absence. You still notice the shift. But instead of flooding the moment with emotion, you let it stand unresolved. That unresolved state sharpens perception. It forces patience. And patience, when maintained under disappointment, becomes a form of quiet power that does not ask to be acknowledged, only respected. The third truth is this. When your effort goes unnoticed, emotion interprets absence as injustice. You worked, you carried weight, you expected recognition, or at least acknowledgement. When none arrives, the mind begins to argue with reality. Emotion offers a response. Complain, withdraw, grow bitter, reduce effort. All of these feel justified. None of them serve you. Unnoticed effort creates a specific tension. It is not anger, it is erosion. A slow sense that your output and your worth are no longer aligned in the eyes of others. This misalignment is dangerous because it tempts you to negotiate value emotionally. You start signaling frustration, you change posture, you allow disappointment to leak into tone and behavior. Without saying a word, you announce that recognition is fueling your discipline. That announcement costs you leverage. Effort is only invisible when you expect it to be seen. The moment you attach emotional need to recognition, your work stops being sovereign. It becomes transactional. You begin working for response rather than outcome. History has already tested this pattern. Those who last do not depend on applause to continue. They depend on standards. Think of the workplace example that repeats itself endlessly. You stay late. You handle pressure. You deliver consistently. Someone else receives the credit. Emotion spikes. The urge appears to correct the record, to remind others what you contributed. But emotional correction rarely corrects anything. It reframes you as someone who needs to be seen, not someone who cannot be ignored. Restraint here is counterintuitive. You do not reduce effort, you refine it. You detach performance from validation and attach it to precision. You make your work undeniable, not loud. You let outcomes speak in environments where noise is common and memory is short. Over time, consistency becomes more visible than explanation. There is also a harder truth. Sometimes effort is unnoticed because it was expected. Competence, once established, becomes background. Emotion resists this reality. Discipline accepts it. When your standard rises, recognition often plateaus. This is not a sign to collapse inward. It is a sign that your baseline has shifted upward. The world adjusts slowly. You do not need to accelerate it with emotion. Men who respond emotionally to being overlooked reveal a fragile contract. I perform, therefore I deserve. Reality does not honor that contract. It honors results, timing, and perception. You can influence perception, but not through complaint, through pattern. Carry this sentence quietly. Effort is not currency. When recognition does arrive, it should feel incidental, not necessary. Until then, you continue. Not because someone is watching, but because stopping would mean surrendering control of your discipline to external silence. And silence, when it comes from others, is not an insult. It is simply unclaimed space. You decide whether to fill it with resentment or with more controlled, deliberate work that does not announce itself, yet cannot be dismissed once seen. The fourth truth is this. When you are provoked by disrespect disguised as humor, emotion mistakes exposure for danger. Laughter surrounds the remark. The tone is casual. The words are sharp enough to land, soft enough to deny intent. This is not accidental. It is a low-risk test. If you react emotionally, the provocation succeeds without accountability. Disrespect, masked as humor, operates on ambiguity. If you confront it too strongly, you are accused of being sensitive. If you laugh along, you absorb the cut. Emotion pushes you toward both extremes. Either way, you lose position. The one who delivered the remark retains control of the frame, and you are left managing impressions instead of reality. This situation appears harmless on the surface. A comment in a group, a joke at your expense, a subtle dig followed by a smile. The body responds before the mind. Heat rises. The impulse is to correct the tone, expose the insult, or retaliate with sharper wit. But emotional retaliation collapses your leverage. It reveals that the remark reached something unguarded. Humor is often used where direct confrontation would fail. It allows the speaker to test boundaries while maintaining plausible innocence. The mistake most men make is treating the joke as content rather than intent. Content can be laughed off. Intent must be managed. Emotional reaction addresses neither. It only confirms vulnerability. Restraint here is not silence by default. It is precision. You choose whether to respond, and if so, how little is required. A neutral acknowledgement, a pause that disrupts rhythm, a response that removes humor from the exchange without escalating conflict. When you deny the emotional payoff, the tactic loses power. The room notices the shift even if it cannot articulate it. There is a deeper layer to this. Disrespect, disguised as humor, thrives in environments where reactions are predictable. The man who always laughs, the man who always snaps back. Both are easy to read. The disciplined man is not. Uncertainty creates caution. When people cannot anticipate your emotional response, they become more deliberate with their words. Think of social hierarchies. Authority is rarely asserted loudly in these moments. It is maintained by those who do not scramble to defend themselves. When you refuse to play the role assigned by the joke, you step outside its structure. You are no longer participating, you are observing. That shift alters how future remarks are calibrated. Here is the sentence you carry into that exchange. Humor does not excuse intent. You still feel the provocation. Discipline does not numb perception. It delays action. It allows you to register the move without rewarding it. Over time, patterns emerge. Some people retreat when their tactics fail. Others escalate and reveal themselves. Both outcomes are useful. What is never useful is surrendering control of your behavior to someone hiding behind a laugh, waiting for your emotion to confirm that they have access you did not mean to grant. The fifth truth is this. When you receive unexpected criticism, emotion assumes threat before it assesses accuracy. The words arrive without warning. Your mind jumps ahead of the facts. Am I being attacked? Am I being diminished? Am I being judged unfairly? That internal acceleration is where most men lose control. They defend before they understand. They reject before they evaluate. Unexpected criticism destabilizes because it interrupts your self-concept. You believed something about your performance, your character, your position. The criticism contradicts it. Emotion rushes in to protect the existing structure. It wants to dismiss the source, question the motive, or counterattack with explanation. All of this happens quickly, and all of it happens without evidence. Criticism does not require agreement to be useful. It requires distance. Emotional response collapses that distance. When you react immediately, you treat every critique as a verdict rather than data. That is a costly mistake. Time has proven this pattern repeatedly. Men who grow are not those who are rarely criticized, but those who are rarely ruled by it. Consider a real situation. A superior questions your decision. A peer points out a flaw you did not see. A subordinate challenges your approach. The criticism was not anticipated, and the setting offers little time to process. Emotion urges you to protect your image now. Explain the context, justify the choice, correct their misunderstanding. The problem is that emotional defense is rarely precise. It over-explains. It sounds insecure. It invites further scrutiny. Restraint shifts the power dynamic. Instead of defending, you listen. Not passively, but deliberately. You allow the criticism to exist without accepting or rejecting it on the spot. This frustrates expectation. Most critics anticipate resistance or submission. Calm evaluation offers neither. It creates space for clarity. There is a harsher truth beneath this. Some criticism is wrong, some is poorly delivered, some is motivated by ego. Emotion treats all of it the same. Discipline does not. Discipline separates signal from noise. That separation cannot happen under pressure. It requires time, silence, and the refusal to personalize information before it is examined. When you respond emotionally to criticism, you reveal that your sense of stability depends on uninterrupted approval. That dependence weakens authority. Authority is not the absence of critique. It is the ability to remain intact when critique appears. Others notice this stability. They adjust how they speak to you. They choose words more carefully when they know emotion will not do the work for them. Carry this sentence into that moment. Criticism is not an order. You let it sit. You test it against reality later, when emotion has cooled and perspective has widened. You keep what is accurate and discard what is not, without announcing either decision. The criticism fades, but your posture remains. And as the impulse to react passes, what stays with you is not the sting, but the quiet awareness that you did not surrender control of yourself to a sentence you had not yet verified. The sixth truth is this: When you feel the need to justify yourself, emotion has already assumed guilt. Justification does not come from clarity, it comes from pressure. The pressure to be understood, approved, or absolved. That pressure rarely comes from others. It is generated internally the moment your actions are questioned or misread. Justifying yourself feels reasonable. You want to explain context. You want to correct assumptions. You want to ensure your intentions are not distorted. But intention is invisible currency. It cannot be traded for authority. When you rush to justify, you signal that misunderstanding threatens your stability. That signal weakens your position more than silence ever could. Most situations that trigger justification are not formal accusations. They are glances, pauses, a change in tone, a comment that implies doubt. Emotion interprets these as warnings. It urges you to speak before judgment solidifies. But judgment is not shaped by immediate explanation. It is shaped by patterns over time. Those who matter are not tallying your defenses. They are observing your consistency. Think of the common scenario. Someone questions why you made a decision, not aggressively, just enough to introduce doubt. You feel the pull to explain everything, your reasoning, your constraints, your good intentions. As you speak, you realize you are talking more than necessary. You are trying to close a gap that may not even exist. In doing so, you hand over control of the frame. You move from actor to respondent. Justification invites interrogation. The more you explain emotionally, the more room you create for others to pick apart your reasoning, not because they are hostile, but because you presented your inner process as open for review. Authority does not require secrecy, but it does require selectivity. You are not obligated to make every decision legible to every observer. Restraint here is difficult because silence feels risky. You worry that not explaining will confirm negative assumptions. This fear is rarely accurate. In most cases, over-explanation creates more suspicion than quiet confidence. People trust clarity of action more than fluency of defense. When your behavior aligns over time, explanations become unnecessary. There is also a deeper discipline involved. When you stop justifying emotionally, you are forced to confront your own standards. You ask yourself whether the decision stands on its own merits. If it does, silence is appropriate. If it does not, no amount of justification will repair it. This internal audit is uncomfortable, which is why many men avoid it by talking. Here is the sentence you hold on to. Explanation is not strength. You allow misunderstanding to exist temporarily. You let others sit with their interpretations. Some will adjust, some will not. That outcome is not yours to manage emotionally. What remains in your control is your posture, your consistency, and your refusal to negotiate your self-respect through anxious clarification. As the urge to justify fades, what replaces it is a quieter confidence, one that does not demand to be believed, only to be observed. The seventh truth is this. When silence from others feels like rejection, emotion invents meaning to relieve uncertainty. A message unanswered, a call not returned, a shift in rhythm that offers no explanation. The absence becomes loud. Emotion interprets it as judgment, dismissal, or loss of value. None of these interpretations are verified. All of them feel urgent. Silence unsettles because it removes feedback. Without feedback, the mind searches for footing. Emotion provides it by constructing stories. They don't respect me anymore. I misstepped. I am being excluded. These stories feel convincing because they reduce ambiguity, but reduction is not accuracy. It is relief, and relief achieved through assumption always carries a cost. Men often respond to perceived rejection by reaching out emotionally. They double text. They seek reassurance. They adjust behavior prematurely. Each move is an attempt to close the gap created by silence. What it actually does is expose dependence on response. The moment you chase clarity from silence, you announce that your equilibrium depends on being acknowledged. Silence has many sources: preoccupation, delay, indifference, strategy, fatigue. You cannot distinguish between them through emotion. Emotion treats all silence as personal. Discipline does not. Discipline recognizes that absence of response is not a message unless you assign one. An assignment is a choice. Consider how often silence is neutral. People disappear into their own concerns. Priorities shift without ceremony. Attention moves. None of this requires your emotional involvement. When you respond emotionally to silence, you elevate it beyond its weight. You turn a pause into a verdict. That elevation hands control to something that may not even be intentional. Restraint here is subtle. You do nothing, not out of spite, not as a tactic, but as a refusal to speculate. You allow time to pass without filling the space. This is difficult because the space feels accusatory. But space is not accusation. It is simply unoccupied. Filling it emotionally does not clarify it. It contaminates it. There is also a structural truth. Men who are grounded do not collapse under lack of response. Their sense of position is internal. They are not stabilized by constant feedback. Others notice this. Silence loses its leverage when it no longer provokes reaction. When your behavior does not change in response to absence, your presence becomes more defined. Carry this sentence into that quiet moment. Silence is not verdict. You remain attentive, but not reactive. You continue your routines. You keep your standards intact. If communication resumes, you meet it without resentment. If it does not, you have already adjusted without drama. The urge to interpret fades, replaced by a steadier awareness. You learn that silence only has power over you when you rush to explain it, and that by withholding emotional response, you preserve something essential: your ability to remain composed even when the world withholds its signals. The eighth truth is this: when your success creates envy around you, emotion urges concealment or confrontation. You notice the shift. Compliments thin out. Jokes sharpen. Support becomes conditional. What once felt neutral now carries an edge. Emotion wants to respond, either by shrinking to restore harmony or by asserting dominance to silence doubt. Both responses betray position. Envy is rarely announced. It surfaces indirectly through skepticism, passive resistance, or sudden moral concern. Your success disrupts an unspoken balance. Others must now revise how they see themselves in relation to you. That revision is uncomfortable. Emotion tells you to manage their discomfort. Discipline refuses the assignment. Many men respond emotionally by apologizing for their progress. They downplay results. They soften ambition. They offer explanations to justify why they advanced. This does not restore respect. It confirms that your success requires permission. Others sense this immediately. What follows is not relief, but increased pressure to remain small. The opposite reaction is equally damaging. Confronting envy head-on, demanding recognition, or flaunting achievement turns success into provocation. Emotion frames this as confidence. It is not. It is reactivity wearing armor. You become preoccupied with how your progress is received rather than how it is sustained. Success exposes relational fault lines. Some people grow with you, others grow distant. Emotion interprets this as betrayal or hostility. Discipline interprets it as sorting. This sorting is not personal, it is structural. Different trajectories create different tolerances. You do not need to explain your direction to those who are no longer aligned with it. Consider the workplace, the family, the social circle. As your position improves, expectations change. Some begin to test you. Others withdraw cooperation. Emotional response tries to repair the old dynamic. But the old dynamic no longer exists. Attempting to restore it delays adaptation. Authority requires accepting that progress alters how you are perceived. Restraint here means continuing without commentary. You do not broadcast wins. You do not defend them either. You let outcomes accumulate quietly. Over time, consistency reframes envy into inevitability. People adjust when they realize your position is stable, not temporary. Those who cannot adjust remove themselves without confrontation. There is a quieter discipline beneath this. You must resist the urge to seek validation from those who feel threatened by your growth. Validation from the envious is unstable currency. It fluctuates with their mood and self-concept. When you detach from it, you reclaim focus. Your work sharpens. Your presence steadies. Hold this sentence when the atmosphere shifts. Success changes the room. You continue forward without explanation, without apology, without escalation. The tension remains, but it no longer directs you. You recognize envy as a byproduct, not a signal. And as emotional reactions lose their pull, what remains is a controlled distance, enough to move freely, enough to remain intact, enough to let others reveal where they truly stand without forcing them to speak. The ninth truth is this: when anger feels righteous, emotion disguises itself as principle. This is one of the most dangerous moments to respond emotionally because the reaction does not feel impulsive. It feels justified. You are not angry, you tell yourself. You are correct. You are defending standards. You are responding to wrongdoing. That internal narrative gives anger permission to act without restraint. Righteous anger carries clarity on the surface. Someone crossed a line. Something was unfair. A rule was broken. The mind frames the situation in moral terms, and emotion follows with force. The danger lies in speed. When anger feels righteous, it bypasses examination. It assumes accuracy and moves directly to expression. That expression rarely produces justice. It produces exposure. Anger narrows perception. It highlights offense and obscures consequence. In that state, you speak to release pressure, not to resolve structure. Words sharpen. Tone hardens. You believe you are asserting truth, but what others hear is loss of control. Authority drains the moment anger leads the response, regardless of how valid the cause may be. Consider how often this appears in real life. A boundary is ignored, a rule is bent, disrespect is overt. The body reacts immediately. You feel heat, certainty, urgency. Emotion urges action now, before the moment passes. But moments fueled by anger do not pass cleanly. They linger. They are replayed, quoted, reinterpreted. What you said becomes more important than what happened. The problem is not anger itself. Anger is information. It signals that something violates expectation or standard. The mistake is acting while the signal is still raw. Raw signals lack proportion. They inflate importance. They collapse nuance. They turn correction into confrontation. Discipline does something different. It acknowledges anger without obeying it. You register the violation and delay response, not to suppress, but to refine. Time cools distortion. Distance restores scale. What felt absolute begins to separate into parts. What matters, what does not, what requires action, and what requires containment. There is a structural reason this matters. People do not remember why you were angry. They remember how you behaved while you were. Emotional response, even when morally framed, invites scrutiny of your temperament rather than their behavior. The focus shifts. You lose the advantage of the original position. History has already tested this pattern. Men who respond emotionally in the name of righteousness create resistance, not alignment. Those who respond with controlled clarity change behavior without spectacle. They choose the setting, they choose the timing, they choose the words. Anger informs the response, but never commands it. Here is the sentence you must remember in that moment. Anger is a signal, not a command. When you withhold emotional reaction, anger does not disappear. It settles. In that settling, it becomes precise. You can act later when the need to discharge emotion has passed. You can address the issue without carrying heat into the exchange. This does not weaken your position. It preserves it. As the urge to react fades, something else becomes visible. You see whether the violation was systemic or incidental. You see whether the person involved is careless or calculated. You see what action, if any, is required. And you remain intact, not because you denied anger, but because you refuse to let it decide who you become in that moment. The 10th truth is this: when emotion demands immediate release, it is no longer serving awareness. It is seeking relief. The urge appears suddenly. Say something now. Do something now. Send the message. Make the call. Walk out. Confront. Vent. The body frames delay as danger, as if holding emotion will cause damage. This is the final trap because it disguises impatience as necessity. Immediate release feels honest. It promises closure. It suggests that expression will restore balance. In reality, it only transfers discomfort from inside you to the environment around you. Nothing is resolved. Something is merely displaced, and displacement always creates consequences you cannot retrieve once words or actions leave your control. This urge does not arrive only in moments of anger. It appears with frustration, embarrassment, disappointment, even excitement. Any intense internal state can demand discharge. The common factor is intolerance of containment. Emotion wants out. Discipline asks one question first: what happens if I wait? Most men never ask that question. They fear stagnation. They fear regret. They fear that silence equals weakness. So they act. And later, when the emotional wave passes, they review the damage with clarity they did not have when it mattered. Relationships strained, positions weakened, options reduced, all because restraint felt unbearable for a few minutes. Immediate release collapses time. It forces a decision before context stabilizes. But context always stabilizes if left alone. Emotion peaks and declines predictably. What changes during that decline is perception. Urgency fades. Proportion returns. What seemed necessary becomes optional. What felt intolerable becomes manageable. Think of the moment late at night, when fatigue lowers thresholds, or the moment after a long day, when patience is depleted, or the moment when pride is bruised and the body wants restoration now. These are not moments for expression. They are moments for containment. You are not meant to resolve everything at peak intensity. You are meant to survive it without creating new problems. Restraint here is active, not passive. You redirect attention. You slow physical movement. You delay communication. You allow the sensation to exist without acting on it. This is uncomfortable. That discomfort is the point. Endurance of internal pressure builds authority far more reliably than release ever could. There is a structural payoff to this discipline. When you do not react immediately, you preserve optionality. You can still act later, but from a position of clarity. Immediate reaction removes that option. It locks you into a version of yourself shaped by impulse rather than intention. Hold this sentence firmly. Urgency is not importance. When you allow emotion to pass without release, you learn something precise. You learn that most urges expire if not obeyed. You learn that control is not suppression, but timing. And you learn that silence, when chosen under pressure, is not absence of action. It is the highest form of it. The world will continue to provoke, delay, test, and distort. Emotion will continue to offer speed as a solution. You do not need to accept that offer. You can remain still while the pressure peaks, knowing that what survives the wait is what was worth acting on in the first place. If this way of thinking resonates, don't let it pass unnoticed. Subscribe to the channel, not for motivation, not for noise, but to keep sharpening discipline where emotion usually takes over.